Peace. Good morning, my people. Asabuhi, Uhuru, I am Ikemba. We charge colonialism.
Peace, everyone. This is Frank, host for the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series.
All right. And we are your team for this morning. Appreciate everybody that's viewing. Anybody that's viewing, as usual, what I like you to do is make sure you hit the like button and share this to your network so that we can get more and more people to tune into this podcast and book club as we have these important discussions about African people, our position in the world, and things that we have to do as a people to liberate ourselves, empower ourselves. And one of the ideas that we like to one of the ideas that we advocate on this podcast is Pan-Africanism, African internationalism, as the chairman Omali Yeshitela, his theory, the uniting of African people around the world, on the continent, in the diaspora, and the importance of us doing that to be able to liberate ourselves from colonial conditions. So this podcast and book club, we usually do a weekly roundup where we look at news around the world pertaining to African people. And then we go into our reading in the second half of the podcast, which today we're going into chapter 2 of the Psychopathic Racial Personality, which was written by Dr. Bobby Wright. He's the person who coined the term menticide, which we read a few weeks ago. So we're going to be reading chapter 2 of this book in the second half of this podcast. Dr. Bobby Wright, one of our great thinkers and philosophers. Also, yesterday was Dr. Huey P. Newton. I like to put the doctor on it because he was a doctor. Dr. Huey P. Newton, who was the Minister of Defense, as well as served the role as chairman of the Black Panther Party. Yesterday was his born day. And so I just want to give a big up to and recognize Huey P. Newton for all that he has done in co-founding the Black Panther Party that gave inspiration to millions of Black African people around the world, not just in the United States, around the world, because there's Black Panther parties that popped up in Australia, in Europe. So that's the type of, in Africa, that's the type of influence that the Black Panther Party had. So just wanted to recognize him and all of the work that he did while he was alive. You can see I got my Free Huey hoodie on today. So I wanted to represent. With that being said, though, we want to get into our stories. I can have a peace to everyone. Make sure y'all like and share it too. Appreciate everybody that's tuning in. I want to first go into the story that I have. I'm going to share my screen. France. I feel like we talk about France a lot, man. Yeah. Excuse me. I feel like they're always up to something. And so this particular story is the Minister of Defense of France. He has an issue with the movie The Black Panther and how France's military was portrayed. I'm going to pull it up for everyone. All right. So France hits out at film over army depiction. Pull that up a little bit. I'm just going to read a little bit of it. It's a short story anyway, but Paris defense minister on February the 12th condemned the latest installment of Marvel's Black Panther franchise, which depicts French troops caught trying to steal resources belonging to the fictional African kingdom of Wakanda. You hear that, Frank, right? I know you're going to have something to say about that. It said they're condemning this film because of the way it depicts French troops caught trying to steal resources belonging to the fictional African kingdom of Wakanda. Because France would never do something like that. They would never go to Africa and try to steal resources. So he says, I strongly condemn this false and deceptive representation of our armed forces. Sebastian Lecornu wrote on Twitter, responding to a clip from November movie posted by a journalist. The scene turns on a group of bound French soldiers being brought into a UN meeting, embarrassing Paris ambassador to the world body. Let me read that again. The scene turns on a group of bound French soldiers being brought into a UN meeting, embarrassing Paris ambassador to the world body after they were caught on a secret mission to a Wakanda base in Mali. Journalist Jean Bexon, who posted the Black Panther clip, noted the evil French mercenaries operating in Mali are dressed like soldiers for Operation Barkhane, a real-life military mission. France is particularly sensitive to its image in West Africa after military juntas in Mali and Burkina Faso demanded the departure of French troops deployed to the Sahel region since 2013 to fight jihadists. I wonder why, there was this demand for their departure, right, by these countries. The ministry told AFP that France was not calling for withdrawal or censorship of a work of art, but no revisionism can be allowed by France's recent actions in Mali. We intervene at the country's own request to fight armed terrorist groups, far from the story told in the film, namely a French army coming to pillage natural resources, the ministry added. All right, so it's this story right there. Why is France, if the government, you see how the government asked for France to come, like, first of all, why is there even that relationship? You have to put things in context and look at the history. The need for this country to even ask, let's just say if they asked France, the need for this country to go to France, which was the colonizer of the country, to come and help them with internal or external problems, is a contradiction in itself. It just shows the weakness of the country, who again was a former colony of France, to reach out to them, the same country that came into, because when we talk about colonialism, we're talking about enslavement. We're talking about the oppression and exploitation of a people that was going on for decades, right? We're talking about people who is, colonialism is a genocidal system, just like slavery. So we're talking about genocide that was taking place under the power of and domination of France. So just that there in itself shows that there's an issue, if even if it was asked. But France, man, they impose their will on people. They impose there's these ultimatums. We already know, people who have been watching what's happening in Africa understand the interests of France, understand the interests of the West in Africa in securing particular territory and fighting this proxy war with Russia and what they call Islamic extremists and terrorists, right? So there's so many layers to this, but I think and I'll just leave it here. The interesting thing, just going back to the article in regards to them concerned about the way that they're portrayed. France isn't concerned about the way that Africa is portrayed and has been portrayed in the media. But it does show, one thing that we can take from this is it does show the power of propaganda, because they know a negative image of their military is going to cause African people, Black people, to respond to France differently in the way that they should respond to a colonizer. Right. And this is why they like to control the images, not just of their military, but control the images of white Europeans, to control the images of African people as well, so that they can maintain their control. If you can, what was it? I'll leave it here since it's Huey P. Newton. Huey P. Newton said the power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. And so this is what France wants to do. They want to be able to define phenomena. They want to be able to control these images and be the masters of what is taking place, or the master of the narrative in regards to what is taking place in Africa. So I'm gonna pass it to you, Frank. I know you are ready to jump in.
I mean, I know, man. You see, the thing about it is, every movie have two sides, and that two sides could either be fiction or non-fiction, and that is why they have fiction movie, and movie also tells a story, and that story could be true or it could be lie. Now, with this movie that the French minister is actually angry about. Why is he angry about? Because it makes no sense. The movie is never had 14 colonies in Africa. France had 14 colonies in Africa. Now, those 14 colonies in Africa, how did France maintain those 14 colonies? Was through its military might. So how can they say the movie portrayed the French military to be a lie? And those 14 colonies were actually being maintained by the French military fear into the African people. So indeed, the movie is stating a fact that when they ordered France to lead some of those African nations, what happened? France used again her military might and start putting fear into the citizens. So how can they say the movie lied? Not only that, France used her military might and start invading the Malian airspace. And then it was even brought to the attention of the UN. But the UN is also a so-called organization and did nothing. So how can France say that's lie? France used our airspace and start supporting terrorists, giving supply to terrorists. That's not lie. It's true. You use your military might to exploit those 14 African nations. And then they come out with a movie and you say it's lie. Now, you use your military every year, you exploit, how they call it, $500 billion from those African nations. And it go to your central bank in France through your militarism. How can you say that's lie? France, you have been exploiting Africa for so long. Now, it is so sad, right? That when we want to talk about this anti-West, anti-France, it is not anti-West. Africans are not anti-West, and we are never anti-West, and we will never be. We will now be anti-France or British, okay? Just because somebody want their freedom does not mean they are anti-you. The fact that, I mean, the reality here is they are the one that anti-Africa because they do not want Africa to rise. They do not want Africa to succeed and to take hold of its belonging. So they are the one that is anti-Africa, not the other way around. We are the one fighting for our freedom. So if someone is fighting for their freedom and fighting for their belonging, that's not anti. So the movie did not lie. France have been exploiting Africa. France have been taking advantage of Africa, and the African people are just saying, France, we are tired, enough is enough, get out. The movie did not lie. The movie says everything that France have been doing. They are the one that are coming out with propaganda against Africa, how Africa is this. They are the one telling us that Africa does not have resources in their propaganda messages. They are the one telling the world that Africa have contributed nothing. But they have African, how they call it, things that represent Africa or in their museums. Up to now, they still have African skulls, where in Belgium, 2 African skulls, Belgium was selling them for $1 million. Imagine that, dead body, African dead body, just a skull. Belgium were ushering them for millions of dollars. So they are the ones. So these are some of the things that if the point movie, are you going to come out to say, or they are lying on the West, they are anti-West? It's reality. It's facts. Okay. So when we come out with this movie, they should just try to accept it, right, and leave us alone. We are telling our story. So when we come out and tell our story about slavery, are they going to come out and say African hate or the Western people, or we are Western, or anti or Semitism, or whatever they call the situation? No, we are putting our story in movie. What happened to us? And we come out of a movie about colonialization, and we put King Leopold, or the so-called Leopold in it, or the Belgian, and we say this is what Belgian did to Congo, or the Congolese caught their hands. Are you going to say we are anti-Belgian? No, we are telling our story, and our story is not fictional. Our story is not fiction. Let's just say our story is real. It's not fake. Okay, so anything Africa come out with what they have gone through with the hands of the European or the Caucasian is not fake, it's real. They are the one coming out with fake story because we have done nothing to them.
I mean, the problem is that their power and their image is being challenged. A challenge to their image is going to be ultimately is going to be a challenge to their power, and this is what they're worried about. The French and the West in general. There is no problem in the first Black Panther when there was this portrayal of the CIA agent who comes in and like kind of rescues or saves the day, right? But there was many people from the Black community who had a problem with this image of the CIA because we have this understanding of how the CIA, what the CIA did in regards to Patrice Lumumba and how they aided and abetted in his assassination. The CIA's involvement in the overthrow of Nkrumah. Like we have this understanding of the CIA's involvement in external affairs to disrupt and dismantle African governments or movements for African liberation. And so this betrayal in the first Black Panther of this CIA agent sort of like coming over there. And this funny scenes where they're just calling him a colonizer. But at the same time, you're helping this colonizer and he's sort of like becomes this hero in the movie. But there's no problem. So in the second, I haven't seen the second Black Panther, but just going by this article, there's this, but now I want to see it. I'm gonna check it out. Sounds good. This betrayal of the French army. There's an issue with that, but that is more in line with reality than the first movie in regards to these Europeans. But we can move on to the next story. I know we took a lot of time.
And let me just even add to that before we even get to the next story. So are they telling us that they want for African people to come and say that, oh yes, the European, they are good, they brought civilization to us, they brought their how they call it, Western language to us, they did great that we are speaking English, that we forgo our native languages and things. Oh, they are so great, they are so nice. These are the things they want us to come and say. So when we make movie, and then we should say, yeah, the Caucasian, they left their Caucasus Mountain, they came to Africa, they gave us civilization. They changed our names, our native name to a European name. Those are the great things they did to us. So we are one. We should be cool. No. I mean, what happened to us, that's what we're going to say. If he did wrong, we're going to put a movie and we're going to tell you people, this is what you did. Okay? So if we come out of a movie, how Libya was bombed by Obama, okay, and how Gaddafi was killed, that's not empty. It's reality. And we put a movie. So that's how we're going to tell our story. So there is no way you're going to stop African people from teaching their history, from teaching what have happened to them, what you did to them. We're going to teach it in every way we can so that even the next generation will come and see it and know who you are. We are not going to sweep it on the road. We're going to expose you who you are. You are not a nice person or nice people. You have never brought civilization or anything good to the African people. Before you went to Africa, every languages in Africa knew how to count in numbers, to hundreds, to billion, to trillion. There is no African tribes or African, or how they call it, a dollar in Africa that they know how to count. So you were not the one that taught us how to count numbers. We knew numbers. We counted numbers. We knew how to tell time. So you brought nothing to us. In reality, you came and just stole from us and modify it to make it look like your own. But you brought nothing to us about rather disaster, chaos, frustration, death, and everything. That's what you brought to the African continent, period. Now, let's get to the next place. The next discussion here is Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso on the same front again, right? Now, these three nations have similarity, okay, of the same torture and humiliation from France. So these three countries are trying to bond, to come together, to unify, right, to fight these, how they call it, Islamic group in their nation or on the African continent. So they are also uniting to form a bond of trade, between them so that they can trade with one another on the African continent as well. So in reality, they are bonding together to fight this France issue together and so forth and things. Because again, we believe what the Malian government will say. We don't believe what Western media will say. If the Malian government come and tell us, say, the French military is invading their airspace and supporting terrorists, those are the people we're going to believe. We are not going to believe Western media, because Western media has always said nothing good about African people. So if the French, let's say the Malian came and said the French authority or the French military are using their airspace to support terrorist activities in Mali and to fight against the Malian army, those are the people we're going to believe. So it is true that the Malian authority have come out to say that this is what the French are doing. Now, these three countries are coming together to find a bomb to fight together. And this is what we want. And again, that is just another force that they do not want to see happening on the African continent. These three nations, they have taken a great step. And even the article that I read, they were saying, how they call it, anti-West or anti-France. Again, we are not anti-West. If they are coming out with this narrative, they should try to write it good. We are not anti-France and we are not anti-West. We are fighting for our freedom. People fighting for their freedom, and then you call it anti. No, the French people are the one, or the French authority are the one that are anti to Africa. The imperialists are the one that are anti to Africa, not African people. We don't hate none of them. We love them. Fighting for our freedom. We are fighting for what belongs to us. We are telling them to leave us alone. Enough is enough. We are telling them what you have done to us is enough. What you have taken from us is enough. We want to possess what belongs to us. So that's not anti. We want to unite to fight this Islamic group. That's not anti. If you cannot help us, we will go for somebody who will come to help us. And again, even in the article, they said, because of the presence, the proliferation of Russian missionary or Wagner group on, how they call it, on the continent or into those African nations, are causing more problem against the French. No. These nations were already telling the French to leave, even before those Russian military start coming in. Because the Russian military, how they call it, the French military was asked to leave, they have to bring people, okay, to help to fight those Islamic group. And that is what happened. It is not because of the presence of the Russian military or private military making it that the Africans are hating France. No, Africans are rather dying, and we need people to come to save Africans' life. The French military are not doing it. The so-called AFRICOM on the African continent, they are not doing it. So we need them out to bring people in. We will help the African people to preserve and to save African life. And that is what we want. We don't want foreign military on the African continent that are not there to help us, but rather they are there to create proxy war and giving ammunition to other groups to come against African people, to create a problem for us, chaos. And those are the things we don't want. And that is why we will go in to bring people who will want to come to help save Africa. So if we are doing that, we are not anti-West. Are you there, Nkrumah? In Kimba, I say Nkrumah. Are you there? All right, I think he went off. All right, sorry, folks. We are facing some technical difficulty. But yes. All right, he dropped off. Okay, he will be coming back. Yeah, so we are facing technical difficulty. Nkima will be back. All right, so that is what happening. So we are not anti-West, okay? We are not anti-nobody. We love ourselves. Just how Europeans love themselves, we are not calling it anti. They love themselves. Okay, just how every other race in the world love themselves, they are not anti. But you loving yourself, that doesn't mean you are anti. So are you telling me the Europeans are anti against everybody? The Chinese or the Asian are anti against everybody? The Australians are anti against everybody? The Australians going to do what they got to do to protect Australia and the Australian. America going to do what she can do to protect America and to protect American. European going to do what it can do to protect Europe and to protect European. So in the same situation, African going to do what they can do to protect Africa and protect Africans. That's how it is, and that's how it goes. There's no two-way street about it. And that's how the war is right now. Everybody fighting for themselves and everybody fighting for their homeland. Everybody fighting for land. In fact, in this current time, if you don't have land, you nobody. If you don't have land, you don't have control of land, you are nobody. And that is what's happening right now. Everybody fighting to protect what they call land. All the chaos and problems going on around the world right now is all about protecting land. Period. That's it. So we are not anti-France. We are not anti-West or anybody. We love Africa, so we will do everything possible to protect Africa. We will do do that, and that is why they always go with propaganda. What is Africa doing on the African continent? Africa is useless. You can't be on the African continent for all that long, and you can't help to fight those Islamic groups to protect Africa. What are they doing there? What the French military doing on the African continent? What the British, or how they call it, military doing on the African continent? The German military, what are they doing on the African continent? Indian military, what are they doing on the African continent? All of them are useless. They got to be out. We need military on the African continent that will help to fight the situation of Africa, but not to be there to be supporting proxy war and so forth and things. We don't want that. They should be out. You frozen, Kima? Oh, okay.
Am I okay?
Yeah, you okay?
Hey, internet is struggling right now. So we're transitioning? Okay. I know, yeah, I got cut off. I had to get on my phone. But yeah, appreciate you bringing this story up.
Yeah.
I know we got a couple of minutes before we transition, but I know you made a lot of great points. But this particular story, just to build on it, and I know you probably said a whole lot more before I got cut off. But again, this is just showing African self-determination, right? Because that's what you were speaking to. I know when you started the story out in regards to this decision for these African countries to come together. And I think we covered this story as well. Not this particular story, but am I cutting out Mali, Burkina Faso? But the other thing too that the West is going to, try to portray these African countries is sort of being anti-democratic. This is going back to the propaganda, anti-democratic, and also pro-Russian, or I don't think the term communism is being used yet, but I can see that is going to be something that's going to be thrown out there as well, as these African countries begin to build ties with nations not particularly based off of their economic philosophy, but on how this relationship is going to benefit this African nation, right? So the West has this idea: if you're not with us, then you're with our enemies, right? And if you are working with our enemies, then you are an enemy too. And as colonizers, I'm saying, like, that's how they're supposed to think. But what we have to recognize is that, the people who are keeping us, or the nations that are keeping us from being able to practice self-determination, they are enemies. And if they have a problem with us building relationships with with other nations that they deem their enemies, then we still have to be able to stay the course. We cannot fold to any pressure that's going to try to paint us in a particular way, in a negative light, in regards to the propaganda to keep us doing what we need to do to liberate our people. So we're going to transition to the next story. I'm kind of just like all over the place because of this internet. Am I still clear though? I'm not cutting in and out, am I?
I mean, you're good for now.
All right. So I was going to pull I can't pull the book up on the screen, but I don't know if y'all want to pull it up. I'm going to read. We're going to go to the second half of the podcast and look at the psychopathic racial personality and other essays by Dr. Bobby E. Wright. And we're going to start from chapter 2. And, you know, Dr. Bobby E. Wright talks about, too, in this book and in his work on menticide, in regards to the type of behavior that Europeans are engaged in when it comes to African people, and how we respond to it, whether it's in a way like the nations of Burkina Faso and Mali, or in a mental-sidal way. And I think this kind of connects to what I'm going to read is going to connect to the stories that we discussed today. So I'm on chapter 2, where it says Black suicide, lynching by any other name is still lynching. So one of the most difficult tasks of a Black scholar is to analyze the influence of racism on Black behavior and attitudes, and at the same time escape the almost irresistible protective barrier of Western scholarship, the analysis of the victim. This analysis of the victim methodology, which involves seeing the victim as the cause of his own problems, has been a major scientific development of white scientists because it effectively leads away from the cause of Black condition, white pathology. As a result, some take the position that the Black masses should not be informed of our truly weak condition for fear of immobilization, a situation which already exists. Others deny that whites have any power over Blacks at all. The confusion is caused by the powerful yet subtle white concept of free will. This concept insists that because people always have choices, they can be held responsible for their behavior. I think like even that opening paragraph is very important just before we move on to the next paragraph. Again, just going back to who is describing phenomena, who is the one who is analyzing, examining, and giving solutions to the problems of Black people is very important, because they're going to come from a perspective that is not going to indict them. And we're particularly talking about this relationship, this power dynamic that exists between Blacks and whites, a power dynamic that exists because of the particular political and economic relationship that they have. And so this part where he says, this analysis of the victim methodology, again, this analysis of the victim, this analysis by the colonizer of the colonized. That's what he's talking about. It has been a major scientific development of white sciences because it effectively leads away from the cause of Black condition, white pathology, right? So we don't, and Dr. Emerson Wilson talks about this as well. Like, we don't talk about this mental illness of racism, this pathology that Europeans have when it comes to their interaction with other people around the world. They come to the Americas and wipe out the indigenous people, take their land, right? Enslave them, enslave Africans and bring them over. There's no analysis, not just on that historical behavior, but on the behavior of Europeans today in their relationship with African people around the world. There's this, they tend to want to individualize the problems of African people rather than look at the environment that African people are raised in. I was having a conversation, or developed it, I should say. I was having a conversation about the other day about this boy. I think it was in Florida, maybe in Florida, but there was a 15-year-old boy who was arrested because he brought a gun to school. But later on, he came out that he brought a gun to school because he was being bullied and harassed every day by a group of people. So he felt like he needed to defend himself, he needed protection. And this isn't, justifying the bringing of a gun to school. But we didn't look at what's going to happen is he's going to get in trouble and punished. But there's no one who's going to look at the environment that he was brought in. Oh man, he said my voice is static. Terrible. That's terrible. But the point is it's like looking at the environment that we are brought up in and looking at how that shapes our behavior. And this I'll go to this last point. I know they said I'm static, so I'm going to say this last thing. We need to understand behavioralism, and I won't go too much into it. But look at B.F. Skinner, for example. He could be used as an example, but the behavioralist in this movement to be able to try to control the behavior of people to get certain results. And that's in the United States. There was definitely this movement led by many behavioralists, but B.F. Skinner is one of the most well known. But go ahead, Frank. No issues.
Yeah, just to add to that, in what you just said, right, and what I got from the book as well, is that he's also telling us that as long as these European fail to take credit or not credit or to take responsibility of what they have done against African people or against other people, as long as they have failed to take responsibility, things will never be, solved as the way it's supposed to be. Things will never be the way it's supposed to be. Because if they take responsibility, they are going to pay the price for it by taking responsibility. All right? Like, for instance, just how they gave compensation to those who own slaves when people were fighting for their freedom. And they gave compensation to those who own slaves in response of helping them, okay, to get back on track financially, right? That's the same thing, going on, and that's what he's talking about here. So people who did all these horrible things and they have failed to take responsibility, do you think they are going to come out to say anything relevant or anything good about the people to whom they have committed atrocity against? They will not. And even as that, as we come out to point out their atrocity, to point out what they have done against us, they are going to feel uncomfortable. They will not be comfortable. They will not be comfortable to speak of what we are bringing out to the table. They will always try, right, to brush it off. And they have done that over and over. And that is why they want to remain out there to control the narrative. Because as long as they are out there to control the narrative and to control our mind and to control everything that we do and to take away power from us, they will continue to be out there and to push the agenda to which they want to push, so that they can continue to condition our mind, to condition in everything that we do or in how we think. That is how they want to condition us, okay, and give them the praises, and then in fact put the blame on ourselves as they want us to do and as they have been doing. These are the things that are going on. That is why he's talking about here as well. How can someone who committed all these horrible crime against you be the one to control the narrative, be the one to be your historian, be the one to come out to tell your story? How can I tell my story, or how can we tell our story? But the people to whom that hurt us are the people who are coming out telling our story. Okay? We can never tell European story. European will always tell their story, what happened to them, what they went through. For example, African can never come out to better explain the Holocaust of the Jewish, right? African can never do it because it did not happen to us what happened to them. So in our same way, what happened to African people, Jewish cannot come out to better explain it of what happened to us. Okay? White America can come out to explain it of what happened to us. Even though they did it to us, but they never felt the pain. We felt the pain. So We can explain it. They're the one that did it to us, but they will never explain how we felt the pain, what we went through, the humiliation, the torture, and even the trauma that we are still feeling. They can never come out to say it. We are the one to come out to actually tell the story, because we are still going through that trauma, and we are still going through that same inequalities, through that same behavior, or that same torture, or that same humiliation. We are still going through it. So this is what he's talking about here. These people will not be the one to come to tell us how we feel and what we went through. They will not tell the real true story. Take that matter and to narrate our story, we will be where we are. We have to unite to tell our story. Even as that, you can see how we are being denied in schools, in public places, even on social media. The moment you become to explain your story as to how it happened, they tamper with your channel, they block your channel, or they censor your channel, and all of those things. That is what happened, because they feel that they stayed in power, and they see the danger coming. Not danger in the sense that we're going to enslave them, we're going to torture them, we're going to hang them, we're going to rape them. But the issue here is that power dynamic is slipping away from them, and indeed it's going to slip away from them.
Yeah, appreciate that, Frank. And excuse me if I how is my volume? Am I coming through clear?
Yes, you're coming clear. Yeah. You're sounding clear right now. For now.
Okay, this the third device, man. Today isn't my day. But yeah, excuse me if I repeat anything. But just the second part of that first paragraph, and then I'll move on. Dr. Bobby Wright talks about how, you have people who want to sort of delude themselves, whether, purposely or not, of the conditions that Black people are in, that we're facing, for the simple fact that the impact that it would have on Black people if they knew the truth of their reality. But he gets into how the alternative, though, is a lot worse. He does acknowledge that it can have a negative impact. It could, there could be different people respond, or people respond differently to traumatic situations. And so he acknowledges that, but he's talking about the alternative. And for Dr. Bobby, you're right, the alternative is menticide, which leads to genocide. So we cannot delude ourselves, and we have to face the reality of our situation. And this is why we talk about colonialism. But I'll go into the second paragraph. The author is fully aware of the danger in exposing the human personality to threatening emotional stimuli, which endangers its existence. However, there comes a time when the risk of exposure is insignificant when compared to the alternative. To paraphrase a mental health truth, the greatest pathology in the world is for people to believe in something just because they wish it to be so. That's important right there. Mm-hmm. And not in the not too distant past, suicide in the Black community was virtually non-existent. In fact, in considering all possibilities of life and death, suicide for Blacks was not an option. Further, all the additional reasons that have been projected as enhancing the suicide dynamic did not manifest themselves in the Black community. On the contrary, the conditions that produce the feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness, which create havoc for European people, seem to have strengthened the resolve of Blacks who considered them part of our destiny. Therefore, suffering for Blacks was and is a way of life, not death. It was out of this cultural imperative that the blues developed and is now being stolen, and revealed the incomparable soul of Black folks. Centuries before whites discovered existentialism, Blacks had accepted, unfortunately, that to live is to suffer, and the ultimate test is the meaning of people, is the meaning a people find in that suffering, which dictates the way they live and die. This historical reality introduces the question: how could a people who, in the worst of times, endured, now allegedly reflect one of the highest suicide rates in the United States? Blacks and white scientists alike generally assume that additional research analysis can be applied to the alleged Black suicide phenomenon in order to understand its dynamic. However, the most serious error a Black scientist can make is to utilize European definitions and analysis in attempting to understand and explain Black phenomena. There is no denying the fact that they who have the power to define, rule. I mean, we've been talking about this throughout this podcast right here. To remove any element of doubt, what is termed Black suicide is really deliberate Black race murder committed by the whites in the United States. Whites in the United States have achieved their special environment as postulated by Watson and Skinner. Therefore, they must be held accountable for the behavior of its inhabitants. Most behavioral scientists attest to the fact that situations can be contrived in a manner that will influence people to engage in self-destructive behavior. Furthermore, once it is determined that such a condition caused the behavior, the focus of attention shifts from the victim to the perpetrator, except where Blacks are involved. Right. So again, I mean, there's a lot that Dr. Bobby Wright is touching on. First of all, I thought that was an important point that we do need to like deeply examine in regards to the suicide rate in the Black community, right, which is at an all-time high, and how the suicide rate in the Black community was lower. He says it was almost non-existent. You know, it existed, but it was at a low rate. And we're talking about at times during slavery time and Jim Crow segregation. And why is that? You know, and why is it higher now when Black people are supposed to be, quote unquote, free, you know, experiencing freedom in America and around the world? So I think that's a good point that needs further analysis. Huey P. Newton, who talked about revolutionary suicide versus reactionary suicide. And so, you know, just thinking, I don't think this is the, you know, the absolute answer to why there's this increase. But he spoke about, he looked at Emil Durkheim's work on suicide, and there's 4 reasons why people commit suicide. But, you know, he talks about this reactionary suicide and how the system of colonialism, European political and economic domination is causing the death of Black people, but we still engage in the system. We still engage in the system despite it being genocidal, and he calls that reactionary suicide. And we do things under the system, whether it's like, you know, we're working ourselves to death under the system of oppression, exploitation, and even our activities, whether it's, you know, smoking cigarettes, doing, you know, just doing things that doesn't work towards the liberation of African people, is reactionary. And this goes, and revolutionary suicide, of course, is fighting, engaging the system, knowing that it may lead to your death. But, you know, revolutionary suicide is more honorable a death than reactionary suicide. So, you know, but to tie this in too, in regards to the environment. So we talk about this suicide in the environment that is driving Africans to commit suicide. Again, this is going back to the behavioralists, and he does mention B.F. Skinner. He mentions Skinner and Watson in the last paragraph on page 16. And these are people who they were analyzing. They weren't talking to and when you read their work, they're not saying Black people, you know, white people, this. They're just talking about people in general. But there's a book. It's called Beyond Freedom and Dignity, I believe, by B.F. Skinner, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. I'll make sure I got the title correct. But in that book, he talks about, you know, different behaviors that behaviors that people engage in that could be destructive. And he says, you know, what's going to cause them, like, more technology isn't going to, you know, keep people from engaging in certain destructive behaviors. So he is arguing that, you know, there needs to be a technology of behavior. This is the term that he used, right? And he talks about this idea of freedom and getting people to believe that they're free, even if they are oppressed. And he says creating an environment that will shape the way that they think and see things which will ultimately shape the way that they behave. So I know I went on and on, but it was just a lot here, and I just wanted to tie it all together. But it's important to understand that, again, looking at the environment that has been created, that is causing the suicide, that is causing the menticide, where the colonizer, he just wants to look at the individual and say, hey, they have a choice. They have a choice within this system. And that keeps us from engaging with our true enemies in a way that's going to be liberating. But go ahead, Frank.
After that, again, that just remind me of a book that I read around the time of 1804, around that same time period when they were taking African from here and taking them to Africa, which is today Liberia. And that was the similar statement that Adam Smith made to the colonial master when those African that they took back to Africa, back home, those were African that were fighting for their freedom in Richmond, Virginia, right? But I'm not going to go deep into that because that's not the story we're here for, but I just want to do the connection. Now, when they cut, how they cut it, those African got caught, and they brought somebody like Adam Smith, because Adam Smith is one of the greatest white economists to them, okay? And he said to them that if you want for these Africans to love you, right, treat them like you love them, even though they are still slaves. But don't treat them that they will know that you hate them. They will know that they are slaves. Give them some treatment, just how you treat your animal. Just imagine, those are the statements he made. Just how you treat your animals, treat them the same. Just how you give food to your animals, treat them the same. Just how you give medical attention to your animals, treat them the same. Okay, give them food, give them medical attention. When they are ill and they need medical attention, give it to them. Because once you start doing that, they will feel that you love them and they will feel that they are part of the community. And what will happen here is they will become more productive and they will produce more goods and products for you, right? And they will not rebel against you because they won't see you as enemy or as threat to them. They will not rebel against you. They will love you. Anything you tell them, they will do it. They will be like, yes, sir, master. And they will obey you. And this is what exactly going on in today's society. We even have some of our black folks, okay, they give them money, they give them position of power in certain places, and they become obedient to the oppressor and not solving the situation of their own people. They become how they call it, they become somebody who calling their master, yes, I obey to you, and forgetting the situation of their people. So it was Adam Smith that put that forth to the table, okay? And then that's how the slave master began to change that narrative around, okay? And that's how they even control the African they took from here and they took them to Liberia. That's how they control them. And as the story goes, when they took them there, they took medical supply, they took mosquito net for these Africans. But they left African here on the plantation. They never care for them. They never get them food. They never get them mosquito net. In fact, they work day and night with barefooted. But you took these people on the African continent and you care for them. So it was Adam Smith that brought that narrative like, you carry these people on the African continent, right? They want to meet their people. In order to be divided, you have to make them to know that you love them. You got to give them some treatment. Let them feel you love them. That's the only way they will carry on. They will execute what you wanted to execute in Africa today, Liberia. And that was what went on there. So again, this is just to say that these people, no matter how it is, they have not changed, okay? They are still working with the system. It may not be the same people from the 1800, from the 1900, but it is a descendant and they are carrying the same doctrine. They are learning because it's like the doctrine is being passed on from generation to generation, from generation to generation. And they want to keep that power. They don't want to lose that power. They want to keep that power. So they are not going to pour in a situation where they're going to educate or unite or solve our situation and things. And that is what happened. We Africans, we feel that, and we have choices. And that's how most Africans would think, yeah, but at this time, we have the choice to do what we want to do. No, you don't have the choice. Because anytime you want to go forward, they will suppress you. Anytime you want to make a statement, holistically to liberate African people, to educate African people. They suppress you. They come for you. Sometimes you end up losing your job. So there's no choice here. And this is what this book is talking about.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I'm just going to end it with this last paragraph here. You know, we could build on this because this is I think this is another important point which he makes throughout the book. So I advise everyone to read the book in its entirety. He says right here, political brainwashing is a violation of the Geneva Convention, rules for the treatment of prisoners of war. There is little doubt that the psychotherapist will be charged with a criminal act if it were determined that a patient, even one who has consented, has been encouraged to commit a self-destructive act which led to injury and death. Yet the treatment of Blacks in the United States is unparalleled in history, and Blacks are subjected to far more serious psychological attacks than those permitted with prisoners of war. Deliberately preventing a people from developing life-sustaining options and promoting conditions of self-destruction are acts of genocide. Therefore, Black suicide is a method of genocide promoted and controlled worldwide by the white race. Consequently, there is no such phenomenon as Black suicide when suicide is defined as the willful and deliberate act of taking one's own life. All right. So just, wanted to end it there. But again, he talks about this deliberately preventing a people from developing life-sustaining options and promoting conditions of self-destruction or acts of genocide. And this has been the history of Europeans when it comes to indigenous people, African people, as they went around the world, preventing a people from being self-determined, developing life-sustaining institutions, meaning those institutions that food, clothing, shelter, all of those things that you need to be able to sustain your life has been usurped by the colonizer. These are things, this is why that there's this continuing dependency on the colonizer, because they control those life-sustaining institutions. But when we have the power, this is why Africa is such a strategic place, because the resources is right under our feet, right? And we represent the majority population-wise there. And all we have to do is make the decision to not let the European continue to come into Africa and do what they're doing. It's a lot more difficult in places where numerically we don't represent a majority, right? Places like the United States will be a lot more difficult, but Africans still can play a role in undermining colonialism within the United States to help African people around the world who are victims of Western imperialism. So, but I think just like Africa has the ability to be able to control, because it's in their hands. Those life-sustaining institutions is in there. They have those resources. But a foreign power has came in and has been able to capture and control those resources. So we have to change that. But I think that's an important point that's being made there. But go ahead, Frank. You had any last words, co-writer?
No. We good, man. You cover everything else. So.
All right, man. I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in. Excuse the technical difficulties. I had to switch three devices. But appreciate everybody for sticking in there and being a part of this important discussion. Next week we'll be back at the same time, 10 a.m. On Saturday. We're going to continue to read this book. We're going to move into chapter 3. So for all those people who want to read and catch up with us, we'll be starting on chapter 3 next week. And again, just appreciate everybody for tuning in. Continue to like and share and let people know about us. Appreciate you. Peace.